Money stress is a very real thing, and I am familiar with how that has felt. Before Tony and I, my husband, before we started creating our budget and following a budget, we were living paycheck to paycheck. We felt like we were up to our eyeballs in debt, and we were just really struggling. And we never seemed to have enough money for even simple things like a few groceries. We were constantly watching our finances and praying that we would not overdraft our account. But we didn't know how to do it any differently. So one day we decided to make some big changes and get ourselves into a better financial position. And it has been quite the journey. So I have talked about this before on the podcast, but we began our budgeting journey in March of 2018. And just shy of 2 years later, we were completely debt free. We had paid off over $33,000 in debt. And the biggest thing that just shocks me still to this day is that we were not making very much money either. Like almost an embarrassingly amount of money. It was so low. But I really believe that if you have the drive and desire to get out of debt and you're willing to follow a budget, it's a small I mean, it's a big sacrifice for a small amount of time, and then once you do that, you feel so much better. And it is such a relief to know that you don't have to struggle and stress about your finances anymore, especially if you're married and you do it together. It is like this bond and partnership to be able to tackle that together. And it is a very powerful bonding experience. And it actually brings you closer rather than separating you with the stress of money. So, we've had a really good experience with this. And today I wanted to share with you some tips here because we have now been budgeting for 6 years and we have been very religious about budgeting every month and tracking our expenses. And we've learned a few methods that work really well for us. So, today I want to share with you 8 simple steps that we take every payday to stay on track so that we never have to worry about what's happening with our money. And 8 steps sounds like a lot, but it really is just kind of going through this little checklist every time you get paid. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And it just becomes more of a routine in your budget routine that takes little to no time at all to just get through these. And it just gives you a sense of comfort knowing you always know exactly where your finances are, you know what to expect, and you're already preparing for any unexpected expenses as well. It just helps ease all that stress so you never have to worry about stressing over your finances again. So I hope you are excited for this one. Are you ready to stop the chaos, the stress, the overwhelm that's filling your life? I'm Renee Matt, and together you and I are going to build simple routines that are going to change your life. When you put these habits into practice, you're going to be able to organize your life in a way where you can be there for your family, pay off your debt, save money, your house can stay organized, you don't have to stress about what's for dinner, and you still get time for yourself. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to the Routine Advantage podcast. Now, I personally love talking about budgets. So, if this sounds really overwhelming for you, or you haven't had a chance to go in and actually build your base budget or anything like that, this one might sound a little stressful. However, I don't want you to take this and feel like it's overwhelming and then just tune it all out and not try a budget. It really is just a learning process. And as you take one step at a time, it's going to allow you to be able to just make little shifts and tweaks so that over time you learn the process and you learn what you like. So no matter where you're at, I hope you save this episode and come back to it if you need to. And even if you are already a, devoted budgeter, then maybe you'll find some tips in here that will help you as you go through and you plan each payday. But the first thing that I want to kind of reiterate is that when you are building a budget, the easiest thing to do is to build your base budget first. And when you have a base budget, basically you are creating a template and you kind of break down what your average income is your average expenses, and you go through the whole thing. It's a whole process, and it does take a while the first time you do this, but once you go through it the first time, you are able to get your numbers, and you want to make sure that you're not spending more than you're making, and then that you are putting money towards any goals that you have, whether it's savings goals, whether it's paying off debt, all those things. You definitely want to take some time and really just decide what is important for you. I know for us, we used the Dave Ramsey baby step program, and it has been phenomenal. So that has helped us, and we've had a lot of support with family and stuff. But if you don't have anybody going through it with you, then they have a great community on Facebook and everything that you can dive into all their resources. It is quite amazing, especially if you're trying to get out of debt and you're living paycheck to paycheck right now. But what you want to do is you want to start with that base budget. And if you need help going through on how to actually build your base budget, I do have an episode that I talk about this. It's episode 7. So you can go back to that if you want to. And then once you have your base budget, you go through and you track your expenses throughout the month. It sounds like a lot. It is not. It is super simple, especially when you already have your base budget going. When you have that, I do have an episode about tracking your expenses, and that one is episode 16. So you have your base budget, you're tracking your expenses, and then at the end of each month, you want to look at your base budget and you want to make a copy of it, and then you want to tweak it for the month ahead. And what you're doing is you're just reviewing it, and you don't have to start from scratch this way so that it doesn't take too long. But really, you're just taking a copy of it and then you're adjusting any numbers based on what's happening the next month. So if you have different activities going on, if you have bills that are shifting, if your paychecks might look a little bit different or you're expecting them to look a little different, it allows you to be able to just make those little tweaks to just make sure everything's balancing out before you head into your fresh new month. This makes it really, really easy. So it just becomes this whole routine in your budget. And then you just repeat it over and over and over and over. And it is very streamlined. And the whole process just becomes easier over time. And it just gives you such a sense of peace and accomplishment because it helps you to stay on track and actually reach your goals. And when you're doing the whether you're doing this, by yourself or you're doing it with a spouse, it is a very good thing, and you feel so proud to start checking some of these boxes off. And it sounds like a budget will be a little more restrictive in the sense where you feel like you're not allowed to spend anything. And it does restrict in certain ways because you're saying like you're not going to spend money in certain areas, but you get to make those restrictions. So you get to tell yourself where you're going to be spending your money. A budget just allows you to make sure that you're not overspending and you're actually getting steps to reach your goal. So your budget is your budget. You get to decide where your money is going. And once you have it budgeted in certain areas, it allows you to have that money to spend. So you don't feel guilty about spending when you already know that it's budgeted. So now it's just time to go and spend the money that was budgeted in that account or in that category. So it actually is more freeing, even though it's technically more restrictive. So it's a weird concept, but it is amazing. So the let's go through the 8 simple steps to do in your budget routine every payday. The reason I have it as a payday is because it does not matter how far apart your paydays are when you're doing this process. It could be every week, it could be every 2 weeks, it could be once a month, whatever it is. This process in these 8 steps, you can do them no matter what. These are just what Tony and I do for ours, and we have learned that these are pretty much the 8 standard steps we take every payday. Now, sometimes we take them in the exact order, sometimes we shift it a little bit depending on what we're doing. But if you're just getting started with budgeting, I would recommend that you pick the order and then you stick to that for a while until you get really used to it, just because it's going to make it easier to do the same thing over and over until you get a really good handle on it. And then once you know and you've got that flow of being able to do this every paycheck, then you could start making some adjustments to see what works best for you. But for consistency's sake, you probably want to do it in the same order every time, at least in the beginning. So, number one, the first thing that you're going to want to do is before you do anything with your new paycheck, you want to make sure that all of your tracked expenses are up to date and your account is balanced. Now, we don't we don't balance our checkbook in the traditional sense of going through the whole monthly statement and combining things, because we are in our account very often, and I am constantly kind of tracking back and forth to make sure that the bank account is showing the same transactions that we have in our tracked spreadsheet. And I have my spreadsheet right on my phone. It's super easy. It's just a Google sheet, and I have a shortcut to it, so it opens up just like an app, and I have it color coded the way that I want it. It's super simple to stay up to date, and it takes like literally seconds to make sure that we're always on track and we're always balanced and we always have a real-time picture of where our finances are. So it makes it really easy. I prefer to do this daily. Some people don't want to track expenses daily and they do it every week. For me, I have found that if I wait too long, it takes me a lot longer to try and make sure that transactions are balancing and things are checking out. And I tend to get a little more frustrated if I wait too long. So for myself, I know that if I do this daily, I'm much better off. So that's just a tip from me. But this is the first thing you want to do is you just want to go through and you want to make sure that where you're tracking your expenses, everything that you're tracking is accounted for. So if it's in the bank account, then you can make sure that it's marked that it has already processed. And what's really cool about this is when you are tracking your expenses, one of the things I love is that although debit cards and checking accounts are very, up to date usually, and things will just show that they're pending, that's not always the case depending on which retailer you go to or where you're processing an expense. So when you have a purchase, like let's say you make a purchase and you plug it into your tracked expenses, you have it accounted for on your spreadsheet, but there are some times where you'll go into your bank account and it's not even showing yet. So if you were only going by your bank account, you would assume that you still have that money in there. And then as you're planning, all of a sudden it hits your account a couple days later and then you're like, "Oh shoot, I don't have that money. I forgot that I made that purchase and now it just pulled it out of my bank account." This happened to us all the time before we started budgeting. So when we started tracking expenses, what I do is I keep them color coded in a certain way. So if I have them paid, if I have already spent the money and I'm just waiting for it to be pending, I have one color. And then once it hits the bank account, I turn it black because then it's posted and it's done. And then if am holding it, I turn it a different color. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, so it makes a little more sense. But really, what you're trying to do right now is just making sure that all of your tracked expenses are up to date. If it's posted in the bank account, then make sure they're turned black or however you're doing it on your tracker. So you want to just make sure that those are up to date there. And if anything is in your tracker that hasn't hit the bank account, that you're making sure you account for that and you remove it from your available balance so that you don't get surprised when those expenses hit your bank account later. So once you find that everything is balanced out, then you can move on to step two. And just FYI, no, step one is probably what's going to take you the longest in this whole process. So if that seems daunting, don't worry, it gets easier from here. So, number two is you want to just add your paycheck amount to get your new balance. And that is all you have to do is you just plug it in and you add that to your tracker as an income and now you've got your whole new balance. And then you go to number three and you remove the amounts that you need for your sinking funds. Now, if you have already followed your base budget plan from episode 7, you already have these amounts locked in and loaded of when you are or what amount you're taking out for your sinking funds. So you just go through and you remove any sinking funds that you've already planned for. And if you need more information on the sinking funds, that one is in episode 32, which explains how sinking funds work and what they are and all that stuff, and gives you examples of what kind of sinking funds you might want to consider. And once you do that, you remove that amount, then you go to number 4 and you pay all your bills. Now, this is just the bills that are due before your next payday. And the reason I do this is I start with this. Now, we get paid weekly because we actually each get paid every 2 weeks, but we are we are like flip-flopped. So it's every other week each one of us is getting paid. So it actually works out really well for us that we just get paid every week. But it's easy to do if you're getting paid every 2 weeks. We've done it with every 2 weeks. If you're getting paid once a month, it just makes it really easy because then you could just do all of your expenses at one time, which just pulls that balance out. Now, when you are plugging in your bills for the next due date, you're going to make sure that you go in and you pay the bills. So whether you're doing it by check, by, online, auto pay, whatever you're doing, that you are tracking those expenses as you are paying them. And just keep them a color because you don't turn it black on your color, or you don't finalize your transaction until you have seen that it has actually posted to your account. But in the meantime, you have at least pulled it from your available balance on your tracker so that you have an accurate balance of where your finances are on your tracker versus your bank account. So that's the biggest adjustment when you're budgeting is you no longer look at your bank account for your available balance. You're looking at your tracker because that is giving you a more accurate picture of what you actually have to spend and in what categories you have some money available to spend. So that is the biggest thing that I have found super helpful is to learn how to use your budget tracker and kind of eyeball that when you're looking to spend any money. And then once you have that done, then you're going to move to step 5. And this is where you put a hold on any pending or upcoming expenses before your next payday. Now, the thing that I mean by this is if you're planning on spending some money. So let's say you have auto pay for bills that are coming out later that you didn't actually pay, but you need to account that money. Maybe it's tithing for church. Maybe it's pulling your fund money. Any known expenses before your next payday that are going to have to be spent, you want to just put in a hold. So in ours, we have the tracker. I will literally go in and put hold, and then I put the amount in, and it pulls it from the available balance. The reason I do it this way is because then it pulls that available balance down further. So I don't think that we have more money to spend, but we still have that money in there. So it's kind of like that little mind trick of making sure that it's kind of pulled aside and you have the money to spend. So it's not going to stress out later, but you don't have it just kind of floating as your available balance. And then all of a sudden you spend too much and then realize that comes up. So I like to just pull it right away. And then when it's time to actually make that payment or to make that purchase, then I just go and update that and I put the date and the actual expense in there and just remove the hold. So then you're going to move to step 6 and you're going to do the same thing with any additional expenses. So this is like any groceries or gas or essentials that you have to pick up for your home, anything like that. I do the same exact thing. I put a hold on that money to remove it from the available balance so I have a better picture of where we're standing after all these things are going to be um, purchased or are going to be paid. And then I move to step 7 and I look at the next paycheck period to see if any additional funds need to be held for this paycheck. So the reason I do this is because sometimes depending on throughout the month, you might have bigger bills that are due at certain times of the month, and you might have, a paycheck that fluctuates at different times of the month. So I just want to give a little glimpse into the next pay period to see if it might be a good idea to pay some of those bills early, or at least put a hold on that money early so that I don't get stressed on the next pay period if things are going to be a little tighter. So it's just giving yourself a little bit of a preparation for that next pay period. And if you don't have regular or consistent paychecks, this is a really good idea to make sure you're doing that, or at least putting a hold on that money and setting it aside or putting it into a sinking fund or something for, an overflow of expense money, so that if bills come up and you haven't had your paycheck yet, that's a really good way of doing it. And then once you do that, you're going to move to step 8, which is just to review your plan and make any adjustments as needed. Now, this could be really confusing and sound overwhelming. So, I do want to give you a little bit of an example. And so, I'm going to break this down. I wrote it down so that I don't have to stumble over all of it and I can get through it for you. But these numbers are just a total example to just make the numbers easy. You might look at this or hear this and say, okay, these numbers are pretty well, exactly what I would be working with. Or you might be like, those are way off and not even close to what my finances look like. And that is totally fine. You're going to take what your finances are and run through this same process just with the numbers that you have. Okay. So, number one, like, well, first off, let's say your paycheck for this example is $1,000. So whether you're getting paid once a week, once a month, whatever, we're just going to say this paycheck period, you have $1,000. And then you're going to go to number one and you're going to update your tracked expenses. So let's say you update your account before you do anything with your paycheck, and your account balance is currently at $500. And so then you move to step 2 because everything is balanced. And you move to step 2, you add your paycheck to get your new balance of now $1,500 total. So then you move to step 3 and you remove $400 for your sinking funds. Now, let's say this is going to have $100 going to a charity and giving fund, $100 to an insurance fund where you're putting money aside to make that big annual insurance payment later. And you have $100 going into a Christmas fund, and then you have $50 going into both a clothing fund and a vacation fund. Like, let's say those are your expenses in this sinking fund step. Now, this is assuming you already have an emergency fund set up. If you don't have an emergency fund set up already, put the whole 400 into that. And do that over and over until you have your emergency fund set up. Then you can start splitting for the additional sinking funds. Okay, so this leaves you, once you remove that $400, this leaves you with $1,100 left. So now you move to step 4 where you're paying those bills that are due before the next payday. So let's say these are a total of $500 that you're going to have to pay before the next payday. So that leaves you now with $600 left on your tracker. Let's go to step 5, and you're going to put a hold on any pending or upcoming expenses before the next payday. So let's say this is, $50 in fund money, maybe it is $100 for church, whatever it is. This is a time where you can pull those extra expenses that you need to have or you need to make before the next payday. And this brings you down to $450. So now we're going to put a hold on any additional needed amounts, which is step 6. And let's say this is, $100 in groceries, $60 in gas, and $50 for essentials like, laundry detergent, dish soap, things like that. So we're accounting for these things. Even though we haven't spent it yet, we're putting a hold on this money to remove it from our available balance so we have a better idea of how much money that we have to work with here. So that brings us down to now $240. So then we move to step 7 and we are reviewing the next paycheck period to see if any additional funds need to be held, whether it's that bigger or smaller paycheck we're expecting, or, bills are going to be a little tighter in that next pay period. And I decide to hold $100 just to be safe. I don't think anything's coming up, but I'm going to put aside $100 for the next pay period just to be on the safe side. And that brings us down to $140 left. So now we move to step 8, which is reviewing our plan. And at this point, I want to make sure I'm making sure I'm looking at my calendar if I haven't already to see if we're missing anything. Do we need money for anything else? And if we don't, then that remaining $140 can either go into sinking funds, it can go towards paying off additional debt, or I can just keep it in the account as that buffer amount. So that is what I work through each payday to make sure that we're aligned with what we're doing. And like I said, it sounds like a lot of steps, but just do one at a time and do it over and over. And it is a process that allows you to make really intentional choices with your money and to make sure that you're both on the same plan if you're doing this with a spouse. It is amazing how much of a difference it makes when you guys are doing this together and to be able to actually make really good decisions. And like I said, it feels a little bit restrictive when you're having a budget, but you get to decide where those restrictions lay. You get to decide where your money's going. You get to decide what you're saving for, what you're paying off, all those things. And if you want to, go follow the Dave Ramsey Baby Step program. It is a free program to follow and it is absolutely amazing. If you need help with breaking down, the budget, the base budget, I have that in my blueprint at yourorganizedlifeblueprint.com, and that allows you to kind of just have a little worksheet to brainstorm all those different expenses and walk you through that process. But there are so many resources out there. There are free apps, all those things. There's spreadsheets. There's so many different resources and I have my episodes that you can go through to listen and take just one step at a time to just really build up your budget routine to make it simpler and to help just melt away that money stress. So, I just want to do a really quick recap for you because that was a lot of information in a very short amount of time. And I feel like I was talking really fast. So, if you need to, do how you can usually speed up episodes, you might want to slow this one down a little bit if I was talking way too fast for you. And my voice still is struggling. So it also sounds a little weird and I have to keep clearing my throat a little bit. So hopefully that's not too annoying. I'm hoping it gets better in coming episodes. I am just praying that my voice gets back to normal and I can stop coughing and all that stuff. But for now, you're stuck with me. otherwise I would have to just stop podcasting for a little bit and I don't want to do that. So let's just recap the 8 simple steps in your budget routine that you should take every payday. Number 1, make sure all of your tracked expenses are up to date and that your account is balanced. Number 2, add your paycheck amount to get your new balance. Number 3, remove any amounts for your sinking funds. Number 4, pay all the bills that are due before your next payday. Number 5, put a hold on any pending or upcoming expenses before your next payday. Number 6, put a hold on any needed supply amounts like groceries, gas, essentials, things like that. Number 7, review your next paycheck period to see if any additional funds should be held or additional bills should be paid from that pay period, depending on what that pay period looks like, just to plan ahead. And number 8, review your plan and make any adjustments as needed. So, like I said, I do have some of those episodes that you can go back and listen to get some resources there. Otherwise, I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned things, whether you're a brand new beginner budgeter or you've been doing this for years, and hopefully you were able to take away some of the tips here that you can implement in your own budget routine. So, I hope that was helpful, and I will see you on the next episode. Did you love that episode or learn something useful? If so, would you do me a huge favor? My goal is to grow this podcast and help as many women as I can break free from the overwhelm so they can truly enjoy their life. The best way for me to do this is for you to leave a 5-star written review on your podcast app and to share this episode with a friend or in your Instagram stories. I appreciate you being here. I hope you have a wonderful day and I will see you on the next episode. Take care.